Do you ever reflect on your past and wonder why you made the decisions that you did? Curse your past self for their poor tastes and decision-making skills? Okay, that's a touch heavy to start a video game review, but Icewind Dale had me doing just that, wondering how I could be so blind as to dismiss what may now be one of my favorite D&D adventures. I did play Icewind Dale when it released, and to be honest, bounced right off of it, never making it much farther than the prologue. I was always a Baldur's Gate diehard, and felt the complete lack of NPC companions and the need to build your own party from scratch somehow meant the game lacked a real story. I felt the significantly limited city environments and far more linear world made the game feel small and isolating. I thought the icy environment of the spine of the world would be boring, and in my ignorance assumed the entire game would be on a snow-covered tundra fighting yetis. Overall, I just thought it was a cheap imitation and capitalization on the success of the original Baldur's Gate. How unbelievably wrong I was. All those things I listed that made me dislike Icewind Dale so many years ago are exactly what's drawing me to it today, and in some ways are its greatest strengths. The complete freedom to build your entire party how you saw fit gave unparalleled immersion, able to craft a group of adventurers that would fit your narrative and background. Doing this on what is probably one of the most in-depth D&D game engines ever to exist is just a bonus. While there is a great story to be told with each of those recruitable companions in other D&D games, having the choice to make your party what you wanted really gave the freedom to do as you please from a gameplay and narrative perspective. There was no need to take members you dislike just to satisfy some meta party build or satisfy the needs of the group. You crafted your own story and motivations here like never before. The game environments, while barren compared to Baldur's Gate, cultivate so much atmosphere in an environment that is woefully underutilized in the Forgotten Realms. The lonely, windswept mountain ranges of the spine of the world, the hauntingly silent city of Kuldahar, nestled in the roots of a giant tree, providing warmth and shelter in an otherwise unhospitable wasteland. The once glorious elven stronghold, the Hand of the Seldarine, now the cursed Tower of the Severed Hand. All these environments form a masterwork of D&D storytelling and make for one of the most memorable and immersive questing experiences I have had in quite some time. Add in the controversial decision to make the game greatly linear compared to its contemporaries, meant the quest would be experienced just as the developers intended. While I won't say a lack of side content is a good thing, here it did help give the entire experience a laser focus that freeform dungeon crawling can sometimes lack. And this direct kind of storytelling is honestly appreciated from time to time, as I personally have a pretty bad habit of getting distracted with side quests for hours. I hope you'll join me as I experience one of the Infinity Engine's most atmospheric tales of mystery, betrayal, and survival, as we explore a centuries-old feud between cosmic forces along the desolate spine of the world. Packworm. Let's start this right out the gate with what has been surprisingly controversial in my prior Infinity Engine videos. I am playing the Enhanced Edition. Some people are purists, but for me personally, This is the best way to play the game today. It adds a bunch of quality of life upgrades that just improve the experience in a lot of ways without really changing what made the game great. Outside modern resolutions and bug fixes, the Enhanced Edition added in quick loot screens, the ever-necessary higher arrow and projectile stacks, and even gave access to some new subclasses and spells not available in the original game. To me, it was an across-the-board upgrade of the original that makes it more accessible to the modern audience, and didn't change anything too intrusive. The original version still exists on GOG if you are so inclined to play that one. I also think they added in new character portraits. I don't remember this cat girl from when I played before.
Good cat.
So gameplay-wise, this is an Infinity Engine game, and therefore plays almost identically to other Infinity Engine games, at least from a mechanical standpoint. It runs off the 2nd edition D&D rule set, and you'll be right at home if you've ever played a game in that style. Where it differs is more how the game handles implementing those mechanics. Unlike its predecessors, we won't be visiting any big populated cities in this quest. No, we won't be visiting the port city of Baldur's Gate, or the city of Athkatla, or even the Outer Plains. Icewind Dale takes place in and around the sparsely populated spine of the world, Faerun's version of the Arctic. I cannot overstate how much I love this setting. Something about the cold and isolated vibe just hits differently for me. I lived in the Arctic for a while, so I love when a game can give me those same lonely vibes. When it's done right, it is instant atmosphere, and this game does it right. Unlike Baldur's Gate 2, that got more outlandish in its environments as time went on, Icewind Dale stuck heavily to its roots. Not to say that the environments weren't exciting and varied, but don't expect to be doing any extra planar hopping in this title. What this really means to the gameplay is that you won't have the resources of a big city at your disposal. You aren't going to have a dozen magic shops or smithies to pick from. Most of what you really need for your quest is going to be found out in the world, and the few vendors you do find will be limited in what they can really offer you. Let's take magic for an example. I had 2 mages in my party, and as this is a low to mid-level D&D adventure, Fireball is the best spell in the game. Fight me if you don't agree. As such, I wanted both my casters to have the spell. Well, unfortunately for me, this wasn't sold in the one available magic shop. I did find it eventually, but only one time. So my old strategy of blanketing rooms with cleansing fire had to be changed up slightly. What I ended up doing to compensate was give all my high damage spells to one of my mages, and give all the buffs and summoning spells to the other. This changed how I would approach combat encounters in a way that was minor, but distinct from Baldur's Gate. It also did wonders to flesh out the unique personality of each character. A more subtle thief mage hybrid specializing in support, and a glass cannon pure mage. The blacksmith in town had a few nice items, but don't expect his stock to change and upgrade throughout the game. What you see is what you get. The entire narrative is that you're snowed into the pass, trapped by an unnatural winter. How would supplies enter the valley? Similarly, in the potion shop, you could find some nice potions, but when the stock dwindled, that was it. You weren't getting more. Those potions were probably too strong for knights anyway.
My potions are too strong for you, traveler.
More than ever here, you wanted to keep your eyes out for new supplies and weapons on your forays outside the city, as no help would be coming from outside the frozen pass. Besides affecting gameplay from a mechanical perspective, this limitation on access to supplies contributed to the isolated feeling of the game. From the prologue onward, you are trapped in a deadly winter climate, facing off against the many dangers of the pass in a desperate bid for survival. The limited access to outside help really solidified that feeling of loneliness. In addition to this limitation on your supplies, NPCs were similarly limited. That's not to say there were no NPCs to talk to, or that the game didn't have a narrative focus. It certainly did, but it was handled very differently from the original Baldur's Gate series. Instead of searching for one NPC who could forward your main quest in a sea of side characters, here, the main quest is the only real show. Side quests took a major backseat, and finding that next main quest lead always took priority. More often than not, if an NPC had a name, they had a purpose outside filler dialogue. What this often leads to, for better or for worse, is a much more linear game experience. While there were side characters vying for your help, they were very limited compared to other Infinity Engine games. And from what I can recall, no side quest ever requires you veer too far from the main path. At best, you might need to enter a side room and find a certain item on the way to doing the main quest. There were probably only a handful of these side quests that felt like they mattered at all outside being a slight experience gain. Like, I'm not heavily invested in recovering some dude's ancestral armor when I'm trying to survive the onslaught of a mysterious ancient evil. Most of the quests really felt like they were added in after the main story was completed, rather than meshing in with it naturally. This made the progression loop pretty similar the entire game. The entire thing consisted of receive a lead on the next part of the main quest, go to the new location, clear the new location, return to town, get the next lead, and repeat. There was a touch more deviation to the formula than I'm giving credit for here, but this really is 90% of how the progression is handled. And it's not a bad thing, but it is a wildly different feel from the super open-ended Baldur's Gate series. You won't be going off in 20 different directions like the original Baldur's Gate. You won't be given multiple ways to reach the goal like in Baldur's Gate 2. And you won't be sleuthing out answers like in Planescape. You had a quest to pursue, and it was generally very obvious how to progress to the next step. This narrative style leads to a much greater emphasis on combat. Don't misunderstand me. The dungeons in Icewind Dale were amazing. Late game, they might even be some of the best I've experienced on the engine, but they consisted of mostly combat with a few fleeting interactions throughout. I felt there was a good enough amount of dialogue with the various denizens of the many locales you would explore, but I didn't feel the impact of my words as much. There were parts where you could talk your way through a situation, but they were rare, and usually just delayed the eventual need for combat. In terms of difficulty, I was pretty happy with the balance the game struck. I played on the core difficulty skill, which is more or less the way it's intended to be played. I found most encounters to be difficult enough to be engaging, but not so difficult as to roadblock the player. Much like the other Infinity Engine games, there would be difficulty checkpoints, wherein you would face a much higher challenge at pre-scripted points, usually against a boss-type enemy or encounter. These were the type of thing that were quite rewarding to get through, and required a good deal of strategizing, but never felt insurmountably difficult. I would be planning out the buffs to counter enemy strengths, strategizing party placements, setting up ambushes, tactical enemy pulls, and overall just experimenting for the best way forward. The highly strategic combat that Real Time with Pause offers is probably one of my favorite things about the Infinity Engine, and it was on full display here. I don't think these encounters ever reach the tactical complexity of Baldur's Gate 2, but they are more than acceptable and fun to solve. The last few dungeons of the game especially gave me some big challenges that were satisfying to overcome. There were some downsides here though. I found the pathfinding in Icewind Dale to be worse than other Infinity Engine games, which is unfortunate as it wasn't exactly good in the other entries either, and is probably one of the biggest weaknesses of the engine. More often than not, my party members would struggle to transition between screens. getting jammed up on each other and the environment. Or they would get lost on the way to where I was sending them, pulling mobs, and generally just getting into trouble and wasting time. The reason for this is a few-fold in my opinion. Firstly, I just think the map design, while often striking and beautiful, is not well designed from a movement standpoint. A lot of the areas in this game are tight corridors, forgotten ruins, and claustrophobic caverns. Often, getting your party members to walk in any sort of formation was an exercise in futility. To heighten this issue, Icewind Dale had actual character speeds, which, while rules accurate, is a mess in a game like this. Characters with a quick movement speed will get ahead of slower party members, leading to a lot of unnecessary waiting around. It also meant if I wasn't being careful, I would often pull enemies with my squishy but lightning quick monk while my casters and other fighters were miles away. Problematic if the pull included enemy casters in need of silencing. Another big issue, especially in the first 2/3 of the game, is the dungeon design leading to constant backtracking. A lot of the dungeons in Icewind Dale are mostly linear affairs where you get deeper and deeper as you progress, ending on a big final fight or quest reveal. In all cases except one, once the dungeon was complete, you would need to manually walk your party out from the deepest depths back to the start. Some of these dungeons were like 5 to 6 levels deep, so this could be a pain, especially if there were traps you needed to get back through. Enemies don't respawn either, so it's not like it was an opportunity for extra experience, just unnecessary padding. One dungeon does teleport you back out at the end, proving that they could have done this for all of them, but chose not to. It's not a huge deal, but it can be obnoxious, especially if you realize you forgot something and need to backtrack twice. The last thing I really want to touch on is the music of Icewind Dale. It is really good and punctuates the atmosphere of your quest. It is significantly more low-key than what we had in Baldur's Gate though. That really punchy and iconic soundtrack has been removed in favor of Icewind Dale's low-key, almost missable ambient tracks. Only 1 or 2 of the tracks really had that high tempo found previously. While the music of Icewind Dale is not nearly as iconic as that of the Baldur's Gate franchise, I would almost argue it fits the game better. It's that low and haunting ambient track that is just perfect for a northern sojourn, where you really need to stop and actively listen to appreciate how good a job it's doing. This often led to some sadly silent combat encounters, but absolutely top-notch ambient exploration tracks. When you juxtapose that to Baldur's Gate's highly orchestral and in-your-face music, I feel Icewind Dale is doing a much better job setting the scene with heavily subdued tracks and ambience. Like, I would probably use Icewind Dale's soundtrack as the backing to a real-world D&D game. Baldur's Gate I might only use in very specific circumstances. Though that final track from fighting Servok absolutely slaps. The title opens up with a story from the Dale's past. Many years past, the Archmage Arakon invaded Icewind Dale with his army of mercenaries, hell-bent on the enslavement of the barbarian tribes. Just as defeat seemed at hand for the barbarians, the shaman Jared appeared to unite the clans and rally them against the forces of evil. The newly united tribes were more than a match for Arakon, and pushed his forces back. On the brink of defeat, the Archmage made a desperate play, using the last of his vast power reserves to rip open a portal to the lower planes. His desperate act proved to be fatal for all involved, as seconds later demons began to pour through the portal in droves, falling upon the Archmage, his minions, and the barbarians alike. Hundreds were killed in minutes. It was at this crucial moment that the shaman Jared received a vision from his god, Tempest, and with a fierce battle cry charged the portal, and with the last of his might threw himself into it. When the dust settled, the portal was closed, and in its place stood a disc of solid stone containing the frozen form of Jared, forever locked in his final moment of triumph. Fast forward to today. A group of adventurers gather in a small, cozy tavern in the town of Easthaven, deep in the mountains of the spine of the world. Our party, created by yours truly, includes a mighty human barbarian as their leader, a powerful and righteous cavalier, a dwarven priest of Tempest, lord of battle, a devious half-elf mage-thief hybrid, a spiritual human monk, and finally a powerful elven mage, master of the arcane. We're almost immediately greeted by Hrothgar. He welcomes us to the small northern hamlet, gives some advice on where to stock up on supplies and items, then asks that we come see him at his house before nightfall. He has something he wants to discuss with us. There's much to do in Easthaven to get new players comfortable with the game world, and actually almost feels more lively than the main hub we'll reach later. We can make our way to the shop run by the shady storekeeper Pomab and stock up on basic supplies. Of story note, there is a temple here to the god Tempest, and in discussions with the head priest Everard, we discover that the Stone of Jared from the introduction is stored here under powerful seals. I'm sure that won't have any effect on the story at all. When we're ready with some basic equipment, we can go to meet Hrothgar. He's putting together an expedition to make its way to the settlement of Kuldahar. They have warned of evil forces stirring in the Vale and have requested assistance from others in the region. We agree to sign on to assist the expedition and make our way out of the valley. Not long into our trek to Kuldahar, the expedition is set upon by frost giants, who cause a devastating avalanche. We pull ourselves from the snow to find that no others have survived. We continue our journey entirely alone into the pass. Before reaching our destination, we pass through a destroyed village. It seems to have been raided by goblins and ogres. Most attack on sight, but a few are lucid and claim they've received a call to be here from some unknown force, promising great power and conquest. Very curious. I'm not going to spoil this yet, except to say that as an avid reader of D&D novels, this should have been enough of a cue for me to guess who was behind the events in the Vale, but I didn't actually figure it out until much later. We move further into the Vale and come upon the city of Kuldahar. It's a settlement nestled in the roots of a gigantic tree that provides magical warmth and shelter to those taking refuge here. A quick exploration through the town shows it to have all the basics for survival, but the residents are in a panic due to recent events and worry with the now closed off pass, trapping them here until the summer months with ever-dwindling supplies. The atmosphere of this place is palpable. You feel the isolation, with deadly winter mere steps outside the safety of the tree's warmth. Top-notch scene setting, the envy of dungeon masters the world over. We meet with the town's leader, Arundel. He's an Archdruid and the one who called for aid to Hrothgar. He explains that much has been going wrong in this small town. The weather is unnaturally violent. People have been going missing, and monster sightings are on the rise. He does not know the cause of all these goings-on, but he wants us to find out. He sends us to the nearby Vale of Shadows, a resting place of sorts that has seen a significant uptick in mysterious activity of late. We make our way to the Vale, and while each of the tombs is haunted in its own way, the tomb of Kresilak is by far the most suspicious. We venture in and find the undead here are offended at our intrusion, more than actively hostile. Unfortunately, they refuse to allow us to explore the tomb, and our only recourse is to fight our way through. At the lowest level, we find the spirit of Kresilak. He claims not to be involved with the evil in the past, but that he is fully aware of who is behind it. He'll let us know, but demands a favor for the information. He says there's a priest of Auril that has been seen nearby. Auril is the goddess of ice, and she hates all things warm. Her followers seek to open structures to the wind, extinguish fires, and more or less just kind of act like dicks, especially considering this is an Arctic wasteland in the dead of winter. Kresilak is worried that now that we've killed all of his undead guardians, that the priestess will come to his tomb and put out all his fires. He may be an undead ghost, but he has no desire to spend eternity in a black, cold tomb. Understandable. We agree to complete this task and head back out of the catacomb. Not far into the pass, we find the priestess hanging out in a cave with some yetis. I tried to reason with her, but found little success, and it comes to combat. With her dead, maybe those AI, Yeti, and Sasquatch videos will stop. We head back to Kresilak, and he thanks us with some loot as a reward, but also reveals he knows absolutely nothing about the evil in the past. He just full-on lied about that and blames us for believing him. I mean, to be fair, he's an undead barbarian ghost living underground. Why would he ever know anything about what's going on?
My Buddha, it doesn't know the way.
Back to Arundel we go. He's disappointed that we failed in our task, but has another lead for us to follow. We need to find the Heartstone Gem, a powerful druidic artifact that can be used for scrying. It used to be in Kuldahar, but was stolen and rumored to be in use by a cult far to the east. Off we go. We find the cult's temple fairly easily, but they are immediately hostile, claiming that we have returned to attack them again. It seems someone else attacked them recently, and we're getting lumped in with that. They refuse to listen to us though, and we're forced to cut through their giant bodyguards. We find the Heartstone Gem was indeed stolen, but there's evidence that it was stolen by a snake cult. There's a nearby system of caves they're rumored to inhabit, so we head there. This next dungeon is a good time, with each floor offering a new type of experience and monster variety. The top level is full of lizardmen. We can save a bunch of the villagers here and make the discovery that this is where many of the missing and kidnapped people have gone. Probably a good sign that we're on the right track. Also, this kid you save says, "Thanks for not letting them turn me into a skeleton." I'm definitely stealing that expression. It is perfect for avoiding social media filters. Saying someone was unalived? Nah, that's lame. We're gonna say they got turned into a skeleton. The next floor is lousy with trolls and snake priests. Then we encounter an entire floor dedicated to a necromancer and his growing army. We stop all that noise, and then move into what seems to be a peaceful settlement. Kind of a weird place for it, way underground here and spitting distance of a snake cult and necromancer lair. Pointing out that one of their carpets looks funny causes them to reveal that they're Yuan T Naga in disguise. They really suck at maintaining a ruse. All I did was ask about their carpets. We slash our way through their temple and finally reach their leader, Exonomai. She is a Marlin, a demon of the lower planes. She rambles on about us helping her old enemy, and despite us claiming no knowledge of what she's on about, she still attacks. We kill her and find she does have the Heartstone Gem we seek, but she definitely was not the evil plaguing the pass, and may have even been opposing it in her own twisted way. Still, definitely a net good to the Dales to have her dead, I think. We return to Kuldahar to find the city under attack. We fight our way to Arundel's dwelling and inform him of our success against Ixonomai. With this news, his demeanor completely changes. He thanks us for killing his ancient enemy and says his plans may now continue. This isn't Arundel at all, but an imposter wearing his likeness. Before we can find out more, he vanishes, and we can find the real Arundel on the second floor, moments from death. With his dying breath, he points us to the Tower of the Severed Hand, far to the south. He says there we can find the elven mage Laeral, the last living being able to make use of the scrying powers of the Heartstone gem, and discover the source of this evil. With that, he dies, and we loot his corpse almost immediately.
Yoink.
Possibly heartless, but I am playing a chaotic neutral barbarian, so I think it's sort of on point for my character. Reaching the tower, we find the mage we seek. He's been turned into a lich. And further, he seems oblivious to our presence as he attacks a squirrel that he accuses of being a treacherous dwarf. Seems whatever happened here may have had an adverse effect on his sanity. Moving through the tower, we find it to be a barely standing ruin filled with the ghosts of both invading monsters and the defending elves. Both sides seem to hate us equally. Fighting to the top of the central tower, we discover the elves on this level, while still quite undead, are friendly and have their minds intact. That's a relief. They explain more of what's going on in the tower. It turns out in ages past there was an alliance here between the dwarves and the elves, and through their combined might the tower was kept safe. One day, however, the normally disorganized monsters started showing up in greater and greater numbers, and even began to show up with significantly better equipment. The elves began to accuse the dwarves of betrayal, that they must have sold better equipment to the invaders for gold and greed. The dwarves denied this, but nonetheless it led to the dissolution of their alliance. Alone in their tower against the monstrous hordes, the elves tried to hold on, but when all seemed lost, the archmage of the tower, Laeral, began the casting of a mythal, an enchantment of unimaginable power meant to repel the invaders. Unfortunately for the elves, this angered their gods and the mythal backfired. All within the tower were indeed killed, but this included the elves. Worse still, those killed were raised as mindless undead. Only a few in the tower retained any sense of memory and their former selves. Laeral himself was cursed to become a Baelnorn lich, maddened by the passage of time. We can locate him in the astrolabe at the top of the tower's spires, but while not hostile, he is far too incoherent to help us. The astrolabe itself is not in working condition, and the ramblings of the mad lich lead us to believe his state may be connected to the broken machinery. We explore every inch of the tower, helping the elves and fighting spirits locating pieces of the astrolabe. Once it's repaired, Laeral is finally coherent once more. He's willing to repay us breaking his curse by scrying with the Heartstone gem to find the source of evil in the past. I do feel the need to point out that this entire quest was easily my favorite of the game, and it just felt so perfectly 2nd edition D&D. There's a lot of fun to be had in the 5th edition, but it doesn't have the same grit and dark fantasy vibe that this one did. Something about climbing a cursed elven tower and making a deal with a crazed ancient lich just feels so distinctly old school D&D, and I'm here for it all day. Anyhow, the scrying points us towards Dorn's Deep, an ancient dwarven mine, one likely long since abandoned. Entering the upper levels of the Mountain Kingdom, we find it absolutely filled with orcs, ogres, drow, and giants. Not a trace of the ancestral dwarves is to be found. They likely fared poorly as well after their alliance with the elves failed. Here we find an Umber Hulk that is surprisingly able to speak with us. He explains that he was cursed by his master, who himself works directly for the evil in the pass. He explains that if we wish to reach the evil, we must take the badges of his 6 lieutenants. One is here in the caves, so we make short work of him and we will need to be on the lookout for more. Moving deeper still, we enter the Great Forge, but find an invincible lich that must be dealt with before we can pass through to the other side. Sort of a fun encounter. We need to get past him, find his phylactery, and then place it in a void portal in the crypt, destroying it and the lich. With him dead, we can move through the back of the forge and re-emerge outside the mountain. There's a segment here where we can free some slaves from imprisonment at the hands of some frost salamanders, but more importantly, we can claim another badge from the frost giants. I'm fairly certain there was a more diplomatic way to go about this, but I was rude to the frost giant guards at the gate and they all became hostile. I don't mind the headstrong approach. Passing through the tundra, we find the entrance to Lower Dorn's Deep, the final dungeon of our quest. Guarding the entrance is a cursed undead paladin. He speaks with us briefly, claiming to be under the control of the priests of Ilmater deeper within the complex. Strange. This kind of torture and enslavement doesn't seem like the work of goodly priests. He attacks, and while we can kill him, he will continue to rise from the dead. We do explore the area, and once again I have to gush about the atmosphere here. There are enslaved deep gnomes running the mine, and clearly several evil factions controlling different areas of the overall complex. We first head into the desecrated temple to try and stop the powerful undead paladin that is pursuing us. Inside we find the Ilmater priests, but they are clearly not in a sane state of mind. It seems like something is controlling them, and the temple is absolutely littered with the undead. One of the priests reveals that they follow Brother Pokalin, a high-ranking priest of their faith. Clearing through the undead and destroying a clearly accursed statue frees the priests from whatever was controlling them. They explain that Pokalin appeared one day and began to lead them toward this darker side of their faith, down a path of pure suffering. The suggestions in their minds from Pokalin started subtle, but before long he had complete control of them. They're grateful to be free and reward us with one of the 6 badges. We need 3 more. The last 3 lieutenants can be found in this very mineshaft, each ruling over their own little portion. Our first target is Marketh, the thief and slave driver. He is located in his palace. We then destroy Mavalon, the drow mage, in his arcane sanctum, putting an end to his evil magic. Lastly, we fight Maiden Ilmaida, a dark priest who is working with the fire giants to launch an attack against drow aggressors. With each of the lieutenants slain and all 6 badges, we finally move into the final chamber where Brother Pokalin awaits. He quickly reveals that he is not of this world. He was banished here from his home dimension when the feud with his rival there became too extreme. When he arrived here, he began to build a military force to exert his will on the world when he chanced upon a magical artifact of great power, the Crystal Shard, Crenshinabon. I cannot believe I didn't see this coming. For the uninitiated, Crenshinabon is a major villain and driving force in the Legend of Drizzt series. It's a magical crystal that has a mind of its own and an unending lust for power. It was created by a host of liches in eons past. The crystal has several powers, including the ability to dominate the minds of lesser evil beings. I should have guessed it was involved when we saw those goblins and ogres being called to the Dale back at the start of the game. This is even the setting it is first seen in the books. This time, I truly deserve to be called a turnip.
You turnip, be a bigger nerd next time.
The crystal will seek out powerful entities in its quest for greater and greater power, and it seems this time it has attracted a powerful owner indeed in Pokalin. He reveals that he was the one to seal the passes in an attempt to stop reinforcements from entering the Dale, and that in killing Ixonomai, all was in place for his final plan. As we speak, his forces are assaulting East Haven. making their final move there. With that, he attacks. He has a ton of help in this fight, but is actually quite easy if you just drill all your effort into taking him down. Once he falls, his allies do as well. This isn't the end though. Before we can strike the final blow, the crystal Cranshinabon begins to glow, and when that glow fades, we find Pocolin is nowhere to be seen, and we ourselves have been returned to East Haven. It is no longer the town we left so long ago. The city is in ruins, and a giant tower of ice has been raised where the Temple of Tempest once stood. Regaining control, we find the town besieged by a host of Cyclops. The first one we meet is trying to kill a squirrel for some reason, and we will be having none of that. We can eventually free the survivors of the assault from a prison camp and find the Priest of Tempest, Everard, is still alive. He thinks Pocolin is trying to access Jared's stone below the temple. The wards placed by Tempest are strong, but will only hold for so long against the evil power arrayed against them. Everard gets us into the Crystal Tower, but says the wards are too strong for even him to break. He encourages us to explore the tower further to see if there's another option. Deeper inside, we come across an unexpected face. The merchant Pomob is here, and he reveals that he was the one to lead the expedition into the past to meet their doom. He was in league with Pocolin the entire time. The price for his betrayal was to be named the ruler of the fishing village of East Haven, a very low price for one's humanity. He tries to stop us, but is easily dispatched, and we get access to the top of the tower where a portal awaits. Entering the portal, the final sequence begins. Pocolin is here and reveals his plan in full. He unseals the Jared Stone to once again turn it into a portal to the lower planes. All seems lost. With no means of resealing the portal, Everard appears. The old priest says he can finally understand Jared's sacrifice, and with a cry to his god Tempest, makes the ultimate sacrifice just as Jared did, throwing his body into the portal and once again sealing it. Pocolin is not so easily dissuaded. He opened the portal before, and he will open it again. We can't allow that. The final fight begins with Pocolin revealing his true form, that of the devil Belhifet. This is an extremely difficult final fight, requiring all my buffs, potions, and guile to make it through. Once the devil is defeated, the crystal tower begins to crumble. We make our escape and begin the slow process of rebuilding East Haven. As for the fate of Belhifet, well, I'll let the narrator explain.
As for the vanquished demon, Belhifet, defeated on the Prime, he was banished back to the depths of hell, where he languished for a period of 100 years, tormented by the memory of his mistakes, and waiting for the day he would return to Faerun and exact his revenge. Yes, yes!
More than anything with Icewind Dale, I think I just curse myself for never giving this game the shot it deserved. It is for sure the black sheep of the Infinity Engine for a few reasons, but I think most of those reasons are only very surface level. Baldur's Gate was the original, carving out its space as the next step forward in evolution of the CRPG D&D genre. Planescape was a one-of-a-kind narrative experience, taking steps into a world that had previously been little more than a mystery. Then there was Icewind Dale, on its face doing nothing to set itself apart from Baldur's Gate, and at a glance, it was doing far less. There were no big cities, not a lot of side exploration, and far fewer characters to interact and roleplay with. You even had to create your own party. From the outside looking in, it just seemed like the budget experience. But diving into this title revealed there really was so much there to differentiate it from its contemporaries. The same building blocks were certainly used, but they constructed a significantly different structure. The thumping excitement of the original was replaced with this slow burn atmospheric story and world that was somehow juxtaposed against its own heavy reliance on combat to push the story forward. I think if I had to make a very simplified comparison, while Baldur's Gate felt like a sprawling story using the D&D rule set, Icewind Dale felt a hell of a lot more like an actual tabletop game using a computer to streamline things, if that makes sense. And the story, even if I didn't have pre-existing love for the environment and a connection to the Legend of Drizzt series, it's hard to deny this is the Dales in what is probably its best ever showing in the video game state. The Arctic and frozen wastes are a woefully underutilized setting. It's nice to see them done properly. The title dripped atmosphere. The main plot was tight and focused, telling a tale in that classic D&D style that is hard to recreate today. You felt against the clock while the mystery and twists kept you guessing who the true enemy was right up till the end. I may not have played this when it was new, but you can bet it's going to be one I play regularly now. So, if you bounced off this title like I did, or just missed it, I say now is a better time than ever to gather your allies, load your packs, and set off to the frozen wasteland of Icewind Dale. See you in the next video.